Goldman.
So that's how you do it?
Yeah.
So you do the,
That's one way you can do it.
Right.
you do the,
That's the only way I could figure out to do it. I had to have a format and
you
it
do
was
the
like
bio on the person and then you create the
solution.
the solution.
Okay,
to their
but now
problem.
since we're being recorded, let's have this conversation so that everybody can participate in it. The biopsychosocial, all right? The model itself basically is how I described it, and various agencies will follow a particular model in which they want certain things reported in a particular order, the way they like it. Okay, the way they think that things are salient. So to use that big word, salient, it's from the French, salient. It means you're on a plane, a geographic plane, right? You're looking at mountains. Okay, which peak draws your eye first? Which one? The biggest one, right? So the most salient point is what draws your eye first, then the next one, then the next one, then the next one, right? So you're dealing with a human being, right? So start with their name and gender. So name, EA, daughter of an alcoholic, times 2, meaning probably mom and dad, right? And 2 generations of alcoholism. So, as far back as they can go, there's multi-generational, right? Their age, their race, however they self-identify, which box do they check? And you go by their identification, whatever that is. The term is sexual orientation, not sexual preference, because if they're not heterosexual, nobody identifies with something that the popular culture refers to as negative. Okay, it's very similar to like the identification of race. Like nobody calls black people colored except 80-year-old white people from the South. So if you're 20, calling me colored is like, stop. And you're from Eugene? No. You like 50 years out of date. So coming to the 21st century, it's African American or black, or like you can ask me. Right? Self-identification, right?
So what do you self-identify as? How do you said ask.
I'm a maroon,
Okay.
right? So that means that's the indigenous word. So by using that terminology, I'm already politically identifying. Okay? Because a maroon is more descriptive term than black Indian. And I'm identifying with a particular freedom fighter, because maroon is an indigenous word for a Native American and African genetic and cultural hybrid. Because of the work that we've done in America. Think Frederick Douglass. Think Malcolm X. Think Angela Davis. Think James Earl Jones. Think Alice Walker. Think lots of folks. Right? So we bring a certain attitude which you've seen in class. Right? I'm about liberation of anybody. So don't get in my way. But that's a stance, right? More Malcolm X than Martin Luther King. Especially when it comes to like healthcare and, equal rights and justice and access to healthcare, right? So that's why, understand why you might use the term sexual preference, but that means that you're heterosexual and maybe you don't kick it with a whole lot of politically active gay people. Okay, so just like African Americans want to be called either African American or black for short, gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans, intersexed, asexual, queer, questioning, whatever, want you basically to refer to an orientation. Because they feel they were born that way. And nobody who feels that they were born that way is not a conscious choice. However, deprogramming and religious whatever, brainwashing will make you think otherwise. No, that's not the way it is. Okay, and I'm also, as a Maroon, basically saying, let's look at what was traditional here. What was traditional here is sexual diversity. What was traditional in Africa? Sexual diversity. 12 kinds of marriage in Africa. 7 types of gender in Native America. Fully accepted. It was only when the immigrants started coming that people started tripping. And by immigrants, I mean the pilgrims. Because, for me, from our point of view, it ain't your homeland if you haven't been here for 100 generations. And I have. At least on the native side. Otherwise, you're a newcomer. And that's the way it is for all of humankind. How long have the English been in England? How long have the Irish been in Ireland? How long have the Germans been in Germany? More than 100 generations. I'm not making this up. This is, if you ain't been here 100 generations, it ain't your homeland. That's it, right? But, the United States of America might have other points of view about that. But 200 years is only 10 generations. Got a ways to go to say that this is your homeland, right? So, part of the biopsychosocial model is you don't necessarily have to believe the way they think. You just have to accept that they think that way. And you're acknowledging that in your clinical notes and kind of adjusting. Now, we're going to go into DSM, which is coming from a particular scientific point of view, which I might not ascribe to all of it, but as a social scientist and an addictions professional, I have to know what the diagnoses are in order to describe them to somebody else. And some things I agree with and some things I don't. But I'll let you know why that is, because you may have other views about that. But the science is the science. So just to go with the biopsychosocial, pretty much this format describes it. Now, some people might be more sticklers on, I'm just reacting to the stuff that I saw like right off the bat. That kind of leaped off the page that was salient to me. And correcting it. Because, look, you need to know this because it might be the difference between success or failure, in an encounter with a person who you have to make an impression with in the first 30 seconds, not an hour. If you want them to open up to you, And so basically when I train people, and I have trained people, mostly black people, who are able to reach out to racist white supremacists who are addicted, reach into their heart and turn them around, even though they're black. Okay? Be able to do that. Now, I'm still working on training white supremacists to be able to do really well with middle-class black people. That's harder. But it's not impossible. Okay, any other questions around biopsych?
After you get the name, the gender, all that, then to solve the problem, is that your recommendation?
Yeah.
So you would recommend...
Because unless you're in the treatment field now, you won't necessarily know. So you can make an educated guess and look at, use your imagination. Okay, because for example, when I told you about, let's say, Gary, right? So 25-year-old logger from Pendleton, HIV positive. Okay, and treatment at the time was AZT, which means it's a death sentence for him. However long it's being prolonged, it's a death sentence. Okay, you're 24 years old, and if you go off this med that you'll be dead inside of 3 years, and on the med, maybe you got 5. Maybe. So what does that do to you psychologically? Do you go on a binge, party like it's 1999? And I mean, people will do that. People would kill themselves. People would do all kinds of things. We're working in the service of life. You know, I mean, it's just like dealing with a suicide call. Okay, you deal with it directly. Talking about it is not going to induce them to do it, but you have to give them a reason to live in the time that you got with them. Doesn't mean that they'll kill themselves after they leave, but if they're coming to you, it means they want to live. Because if they want to do themselves, they just do themselves. You're giving them a reason to live. You may not feel like living all that much yourself, but you know, sometimes you have to give them a reason to live. That's realistic and immediate. As an example, because that's part of their mindset, right? So if somebody feels suicidal because they're coming down from meth or cocaine, that's part of the drug, and we'll be talking about that with DSM. So this is going to be content heavy. The slides will be up because, you know, it's content heavy. I hate to use lots of dense words there, but there it is. That's where we got to go. So DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, commonly referred to as DSM-5, latest version of the American Psychiatric Association's gold standard test on the names, symptoms, and diagnostic features of every recognized mental illness, including addictions. So this is just mental illnesses and addictions. Not the ICD-9, which is physical conditions. This is mental. But if you remember in the first week when I talked to you about from SAMHSA's point of view, lots of folks with mental illness and addictions have physical ailments too that are complicated by or are a result of their mental illness. People don't take care of themselves when they're crazy. And they just may simply be loaded. But from this point of view, that makes you crazy. Okay, this particular edition was published in May of last year, 20 years after the last one, which was DSM-4. It recognizes substance-related disorders resulting from the use of 10 separate classes of drugs, including alcohol, caffeine, cannabis, hallucinogens, phencyclidine, or similarly acting aryl cyclohexamines. Say that 3 times really fast. Other hallucinogens such as LSD, inhalants, opioids, sedatives, sedative hypnotics, anxiolytics, stimulants, including amphetamine-type substances, cocaine and other stimulants, tobacco, and other or unknown substances. Now, here's the reason that other or unknown substances is in there. It's recognizing, finally, that new shit keeps happening. New drugs keep emerging. New drugs, which actually may be old recycled drugs, or generally new drugs. We don't know, necessarily. Now, my tendency after 40 years in the field is to go, this ain't actually new. This seems like something recycled from the old days. And I'm old enough to remember the old days, so. So, for example, with bath salts, which may be something new, I used to think, oh, it's PCP, because it's easy to make. And you have a new generation that is not as streetwise as us old dogs, so they can be tricked easy. Oh, it's not black tar, it's opium. Oh, it's just bath salts, where it either could be phencyclidine, or what people are talking about is They're cannabinoids that are rare in the plant but have been chemically isolated and concentrated in a new way, producing certain effects, making them more dangerous because they're concentrated. And they're not technically illegal because nobody's done the analysis about what they are. Because if you actually use them in bath salts, you're probably not getting them in as strong a concentration as smoking them. Right? Use the way they're advertised, which I think is a loophole, but you know, it's another loophole in the law that we've seen. Come up. Yeah, go ahead.
Also because they say not for human consumption.
Right.
So.
Yeah, meaning you're not supposed to take it into your body. Yeah, you can bathe in it, which is the same as getting it into your body, but okay, if you don't need it, it's not concentrated, right? So, I mean, it's a loophole. But people aren't using them that way.
I think they're smoking them though.
They're smoking them, yeah. Notice that you're getting them in gas stations and smoke shops and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
I heard that because they put that sticker on it, that most of the products, I like watched a documentary about it, and like they showed how they produce the fake marijuana, and like they like soak it in like nail polish remover. And,
Yeah.
Sketch.
Yeah, in acetone. Or, okay, there are weird trends that will come up every once in a while. So if you remember, what was it, the HBO series 6 Feet Under? So there was a trend for like soaking weed or oregano in embalming fluid and smoking that. That's not a new thing. That was an old thing.
People really did
That came back. Yeah, people really did that. Remember, I don't have to make stuff up.
Makes it different cigarettes in it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just weird.
Okay, which was a variation on another meme, which was, you know, if I told you about Kathy, so Kathy was, you know, West Side Crip, water dealer, so water is liquid PCP. Buy an ounce of liquid PCP from the mafia, come back to LA, dilute it with tap water, and then dip super cools in it. Okay, and then you have a phencyclidine delivery system. And you can sell the super cools for $5 a piece. In some East Coast, I mean, that's why one of the names for PCP was Sherm, because you use Nat Sherman cigarettes from New York, which were brown paper. You dip it in a PCP solution, you can't tell. But if you dip it in cools, it discolors the paper, right? So, yeah. Anyway, super cool PCP delivery system, $5 a piece, which is why those 3 kids could net 10 grand a month from a $2,000 investment each in 1980, right? So, I mean, what does a 16-year-old do with 10 grand a month? You know, I mean, so again, many of these old, so that was, you know, like dipping PCP, that just mimetically morphed into, oh, dip your cigarettes in embalming fluid. Smoke that. Crazy, I know, but people do that kind of stuff. And those trends keep coming back. So hence, other or unknown substances, what happens to your brain when you smoke embalming fluid? Yeah.
Or your lungs.
Or your lungs, etc. Right. Okay, therefore, while some major groupings of psychoactive substances are specifically identified, use of other or unknown substances can also form the basis of a substance-related or addictive disorder. So, right, after, you know, dealing with drug problems consciously as a society for 40 or 50 some odd years, they finally come around to, okay, let's just cover everything that people do, however insane it will be, whether it's a flash in the pan trend or recycled trend. We've seen both. You can't technically say that Glade or acetone or paint huffing is a drug, but technically from the point of view of the body, it is, right? I mean, I could never understand why people would huff paint, but, you know, my clients that did huff paint, said that black paint or silver or gold tasted better. Okay. Sure. And people who do, okay, so that's, young folks and, some, by young, I mean younger than me. So, some 20-year-olds are into that too. You do that because you ain't got access to low-cost weed or something like that, and it's cheap. It's a household chemical. People will do it. If you do body work, you will also see the same effect with people who are in a spray booth all the time. They will come out drunk because of the effect of the paint on your body. Because your liver wasn't designed to handle it, and it winds up doing as much liver damage as alcohol. And if you're gonna go Miller time with a case of beer after you've been spending a day in the paint booth, you're gonna compound that problem. So again, DSM is acknowledging all these different things, and I'm telling you, look out for this, because a drug problem may not come from just people consciously using drugs, but what they're doing as an occupation too, unintentionally. Dealing with hazardous materials. DSM-5 explains that the activation of the brain's reward system is central to problems arising from drug use. The rewarding feeling that people experience as a result of taking drugs may be so profound they neglect other normal activities in favor of taking the drug. So while the pharmacological mechanisms for each class of drugs is different as far as the brain and body are concerned, the activation of the reward system is similar across substances in producing feelings of pleasure or euphoria, which is often referred to, of course, as a high or a buzz or whatever it is, right? From those 10 different classes of drugs and other processes. Recognizes also that people are not all automatically or equally vulnerable to developing substance-related disorders. Some individuals have lower levels of self-control, which may be brain-based. So when we talk about, if you took 195, the previous class, that book about willpower is not enough, well, we don't even define what will is. Where it specifically is. What is it as a skill set? Is there a will gym you can go to build up your willpower? Lift weight? What is it that you have to do? Nobody defines that exactly, right? So that's why willpower is not enough. Well, some drugs erode your capacity, the capacity of your brain to have breaks. Meth is one excellent example of that. There's a part of your brain that says stop even when, this feels good, but this can't be that good. It's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. No, K. And then no K becomes okay. Okay becomes, excuse my Anglo-Saxonism, you get a case of the fuckets. I'm just using real language from clients, right? You've heard the phrase, right? People are nodding. I ain't cussing over educational television. I'm just saying, let's be real. All right? So, lower levels of self-control, which may be brain-based. So people might be born with weak brakes. Especially if you're multi-generationally drug exposed. Got clients that are crack babies, meth babies. What do those individuals who are exposed in the womb look like at 26 in school? Well, I know what they look like. They got good willpower for not using drugs, but not so great at forming sentences or learning a new language, or they're real sensitive, which might mean they have the normal sensibility just turned up to 10 or 100, where ours are usually turned down to 3. Same capacity, just no filters. because they didn't have any filters in the womb. So naturally, they're hypersensitive, right? So again, teach them to self-regulate to the degree that they can remember. Memory function can get impaired. So brain base, which predisposes them to developing problems if exposed to drugs. So use and induced disorders. So DSM, this is new with DSM-5. We used to talk about in 4 and 4R, there's a difference between abuse and dependence. Gone are those definitions. So just to mention it, okay? Abuse meant you could basically develop a problem with a substance but not be physically addicted to it. But continued abuse could lead to addiction, which is dependence. Okay, that was 4 and 4R. Now, okay, you have substance use disorders, patterns of symptoms resulting from use of a substance, which the individual continues to take despite experiencing problems as a result. So in that was this is kind of the old definition of abuse, but they go beyond that. And substance-induced disorders. All right, so you get problems from using, from the physical effects and the psychological effects of the drug itself. Then there's substance-induced disorders, which include intoxication, right? Because you can use and not get loaded. Intoxication. So that comes from induced. Withdrawal, substance-induced mental disorders, including substance-induced psychosis, substance-induced bipolar and related disorders, substance-induced depressive disorders, substance-induced anxiety disorders, substance-induced obsessive-compulsive and related disorders, substance-induced sleep disorders, substance-induced sexual dysfunction, substance-induced delirium, and substance-induced neurocognitive disorders, which in plain English, neuro, the actual nerves, have experienced damage as a result of using, so they don't work as well. Cognitive thinking. Yeah.
I know someone that had a meth problem, they recovered, but the doctor said their nervous system was so fried that now they will never be able to sleep. They don't sleep more than an hour a night if they get that, and some nights they go for a week with no.
Yeah.
And so they can't cure that or prescribe anything.
They can't?
Not really,
Yeah.
because then it's just another drug for the person. And
Right.
it didn't work. They tried it and it didn't put
Right.
the person to sleep.
Yeah, that's not unheard of, right? So this is why I say, even though I don't like stealing a page from the anti-drug people, because it's not scientifically precise to say this, I'm going to say it. Meth is brain cancer. It does direct damage to nerve tissue. And depending on who you are or where the damage occurs, there are some things that happen on it which are a result of the drug, hence the induced. Like, if you do a run, and classically, when meth addicts do a run, it's for multiple days. If by definition, you're not sane after 3 days of not sleeping, what do you think is going to happen on meth if you're up for 3 weeks or a week? Okay? Now, we may call it tweaking, but to them, it looks real. Like when I mentioned, when my old office, before they built up Building 19, had a tweaker come in, and he swore up and down that there's a sniper in the tree line. Which, wait, how is a sniper standing up at the top of a tall tree in the wind, aiming a sniper rifle through my window at you? Why you got people in the telephone poles outside your apartment trying to kill you? Like, why are you so important? Right? I mean, but he saw, look, see, no, there's nothing there. But he's seeing it. So, meth-induced psychosis, right? Because he'd been up for 3 weeks. Hallucinating. So, what happens then if he's off the drug? Well, what we've seen with doing brain scans on meth folks is you don't return to normal, you return to a new normal. And that's only after 3 years of continuous non-use. Takes the brain to repair itself as far as it's going to. And what does that look like if sections of the brain are gone that regulate sleep or damage or regulate sleep? Right, and that's going to be individual.
Permanent.
It's permanent. Until we learn how to regrow sections of the brain, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, there's a limit to how much time will heal that particular wound, right? So even if we, for example, go back to slide, thanks. All right, so the second line. So if we just use meth, okay, as the drug that we plug into this equation, all right? Intoxication, all right, you're wired. Withdrawal is going to bring depression. Substance-induced psychosis. Meth psychosis, Substance-induced bipolar. Yeah, you're up, you're down, you crash. Up, manic, depressive, manic, depressive, manic, depressive. The meth experience replicates certain forms of mental illness. Anxiety disorders. Now, anxiety, remember, is future-focused fear. Right? Panic attack. Like paranoia, right. Okay, anxiety is future-focused fear, paranoia. Sometimes just because you, if they actually are after you, the paranoia is justifiable. But if they're not really, why are you that important? It's in your head. Because how, methamphetamine works, and when we get to the drugs, you'll see how that, Substance-induced obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, a lot of people, I used to do meth and I would clean. You've heard people talk about that. Yeah, I would clean my house. But yeah, meth as making Susie homemaker. Don't know about that. Or taking Adderall so you could study. Adderall is pharmaceutical meth. There are people who do that. People who basically front having ADHD as adults and take meth or Adderall to study, to focus. I'm not saying being a good student is an obsessive compulsive disorder. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, there are skills of attention that you need in focus that we need to develop, people. Substance-induced sleep disorders, boom, there it is, right? Being awake for 3 weeks, sleep disorder. Sexual dysfunction, which could mean not being able to function or not having a pleasure response. Delirium and neurocognitive disorders. Right. So substance use disorders and substance-induced disorders. You had a cue? You already had...
Yeah, you had some questions.
Okay. So, substance use disorders span a wide variety of problems arising from substance use and cover 11 different criteria. 1, taking the substance in larger amounts for longer than you meant to. Wanting to cut down or stop using the substance but not managing to. Spending a lot of time getting, using, or recovering from use of the substance. Craving and urges to use the substance. not managing to do what you should at work, home, or school because of substance use, continuing to use even when it causes problems in relationships, giving up important social, occupational, recreational activities because of substance use, using substances again and again even when it puts you in danger, continuing to use even when you know you have a physical or psychological problem that could have been caused by or made worse by the substance, needing more of the substance to get the effect you want, that's physical tolerance, and development of withdrawal symptoms which can be relieved by taking more of the substance or substances. So this is also combining a bunch of categories and findings from DSM-4 and just saying, okay, let's just boil this down to an essential 11, and then we can do mild to moderate to severe in terms of how many numbers that you have of these you have. So as an example, come on. Okay, it allows us to specify how severe the substance is depending on how many symptoms identified. So 2 to 3 is mild, 2 or 3 symptoms, it's mild. 4 to 5, moderate. 6 or more, severe substance use disorder. Now this will be interesting when this hits. I mean, it's hit already, right? In terms of the effect on the field. Because I can see why they went through this, but this will really require that you understand how the drugs work and what constitutes a problem. Because you could have a problem that could be severe just from how you're doing it. So clinicians can also add an early remission. Early remission means less than a year. In sustained remission, more than a year. Or a maintenance therapy, which basically is recognizing, because obviously this is a medical model, and those of you who follow the 12-step framework will kind of be, yeah. But here it is. It's the medical community, right? I tend to be a drug-free guy myself. About, okay, let's not do methadone, but if you have to do methadone or some kind of maintenance therapy, basically the client should know that if they ever decide to go off methadone or Suboxone or whatever, that you're going to have a longer kick than from street heroin. And obviously I'm not going to tell you to try and quit from street heroin. Ethically, I can't do that. But that is a reality. All right? So, maintenance therapy. So methadone, Suboxone, disulfiram is antabuse. And also in a controlled environment. That is jail, prison, secure treatment. Now, here's the thing, and here's the reality, and I'm just going to repeat it because they're not going to kill me for saying this, because it's a reality. Jail and prison, while secure environments, are not drug-free. Drugs can be smuggled in. They can be. So the assumption might be that just because somebody's in prison, then they're going to be drug-free for all that time. The reality is that might not be the case. So you got to be careful with who you talk about that with and where you talk about it. I'm just saying because I got some street cred out there, so I'm just going to tell the truth about it. So, purpose of an addiction. So any questions about that so far? All right, the purpose of an addiction is to cover up, oh, there is one thing I should talk about, basically because it's torn from the headlines. So Philip Seymour Hoffman just OD'd on Super Bowl Sunday fatally. Found him in his Manhattan, in his village apartment with a needle in his arm. Now he started from oxys, a script opiate problem. So he was prescribed oxys, legitimately. But unless you detox yourself from using oxys, pretty soon you're going to reach a plateau with the tolerance where you're going to require more or stronger. And if you can't get the oxys, it's easier to get street heroin, which increases the possibility that you might OD. Which is what happened with him. And presumably, since he's a millionaire or whatever, I mean, access wasn't a problem. But if you shoot up when nobody's there, you're out. Okay? So, at some point, he could have been diagnosed, or we would have known at some point that when he crossed the line from prescription opiate use, and if he wasn't detoxed from that, and then it's going to be predictive that somebody with lots of money, as Robin Williams once said, cocaine is God's way of telling you you're making too much money. Heroin's the same way. You could have been watching out for that. That is why they hire drug counselors to go out with rock bands. Always thought that was weird, but wouldn't have minded that job myself. So the purpose of an addiction is to cover up an internal emotional process, positive or negative. So an addiction is goal-oriented. In addiction, the emphasis is usually covering up rather than experiencing, resolving, or transforming the emotional process. So if you were taught how to do this safely yourself, you wouldn't need to gamble, have sex addictively, drugs, spend, eat, comfort food, overwork, procrastinate. So these are all things that engage the brain reward system similar to a drug. So if you're taught how to do this, you don't need the addiction. But the purpose of an addiction is to cover up an internal emotional process, positive or negative. So people can understand why you would want to self-medicate pain. It's trickier to understand if you were basically emotionally abused and basically told that you didn't deserve good things, that if you felt good about yourself, you'd feel guilty and use to cover up that. That's why the positive or negative. Why would you want to cover up being positive? Well, if you're taught that you don't deserve good things, then you try and erase that. I know it's weird, but it happens. Addictions are goal-oriented. So anything, a substance, physical, chemical, or a process, something you do that engages brain reward can be addicting. Particularly if it's psychoactive, that is, it changes how you perceive, think, or feel. It's also true, nothing must become addicting. Though, smoking heroin and cocaine are pretty much like playing Russian roulette with a fully loaded weapon. All you have is misfires to protect you. Nothing must become addicting. So goal is brain reward, pleasure, or the absence of pain. Okay? Addiction is characterized by tolerance. Basically, you need more of whatever the experience is to get the same effect. Let me talk about, there's three kinds of tolerance. This is with chemicals. I know I got a slide on this, but I want to talk about it just now. Tolerance. Metabolic tolerance. That's literally a function of the liver. You take the substance, the liver recognizes it, begins to break it down, and becomes familiar with doing that. And this can be inherited. Behavioral, so metabolic, behavioral, and tissue. So, metabolic. Take, for example, drinking. All right? So, the first time you drank, think back to that time. Half a Bud Light might have meant that you felt a buzz or you felt drunk from half a beer, especially if you drank as a kid. All right? Sooner or later, you can graduate to 1 12-ounce beer, the same effect, and then 2, then a 6-pack, then et cetera, et cetera. That's metabolic tolerance, okay? Where you get used to the substance by constant exposure. Metabolic, and the body learns to break it down as fast as it can, which in the case of alcohol is still 1 dose per hour, not any faster. Okay? This sets up behavioral tolerance, where you learn to function normally, in air quotes, in the continued presence of the substance. You basically just learn to drive your body loaded. You know, we used to call this, like for example with LSD, maintain. Sure, drop acid, go to Thanksgiving dinner with my parents.
Did you eat a lot?
Not a whole lot.
It was all wiggling, wasn't it?
Let's just say it was not only colorful, but lively. But, you know, I was joking and, you know, I had my sense of humor because, again, could maintain. It wasn't a see God dose. Okay, just minimally frying. You know, I had electric body, trailers, which is fun, you know. Ooh. But can't do that, but I'll just be staring at the fork. You know, can't be doing that. Maintain, right? This is also called holding your liquor, if it's like drugs, or, you know, lightweight if you're smoking weed, or whatever. I mean, I'm using dated terms because I'm old, all right? I'm just saying that's where that comes from. Continued use of the substance, you get to be an old-handed doing it, and you can appear more or less normal, you think. You know, if it's weed, you still reek. I don't care if you use gum or scope. You look baked. I don't care much how much Visine you use. You know, I mean, whatever, right? Behavioral sets up tissue tolerance. Tissue means with the continued use of the substance, you're on it for so long that your body needs the substance to function normally, and this is where withdrawal comes in. In the absence of the substance, you go into withdrawal. And what withdrawal is, I mean, a simple way to think of withdrawal, it's the opposite of what the primary drug effect is. So remember, side effects is a marketing term. You're taking the drug for its primary effects. Okay, you're not taking meth to be depressed. You're taking it to be stimulated. So withdrawal from meth is depression. Alcohol is a sedative hypnotic. In the absence of alcohol, anxiety goes up. You're stimulated. You go through DTs. Right? If you're using weed to medicate your anger, withdrawal from weed, you're pissed off. A lot. Right? Withdrawal is the opposite of the primary effect. Q?
What about reverse tolerance?
Good. Thank you. Reverse tolerance comes off of tissue. Specifically with alcohol, reverse tolerance is liver damage, where the alcohol or whatever drug combinations you've done have lunched your liver so that it takes less to get you drunk because there's less liver to deal with it. So you can see this with reverse tolerance, particularly with people who, for example, consume a lot of alcohol, spend a lot of time in the paint booth or the chemical booth or whatever, and both of those things lunch their livers. Less liver to process the alcohol, less alcohol to get you off. So it usually comes after liver damage, and the way you check for this, have a liver panel done for them and a liver function done for them. Usually many treatment programs will have access to, getting blood work done and stuff like that. Here at Lane, because we got student health, can order liver panels and all that other kind of stuff to check for liver function. So understand hepatitis. What hepatitis is simply an inflammation of the liver, which can be caused by a lot of different things. So you're looking for elevated liver enzymes, and that was one early stage of hepatitis. And you can also track that to liver damage too, elevated enzymes and liver function and all that. So 4 kinds of tolerance: metabolic, behavioral, tissue tolerance, and also I should also say withdrawal. Another symptom of withdrawal is cravings. Cravings and urges, which are mental, psychological, but they're real. Cravings and urges are basically persistent thoughts that you act upon. And unless you can basically teach them some form of mind control, or, interrupting those persistent thoughts or urges, think, do. Consequences. No, it won't do. Right? So you're teaching that skill. So it's not just think, do. So understanding how drugs work, and I may get into this with this specific drug, but so for example, I mentioned LSD. So LSD is one of those weird drugs where you develop tolerance to it the more you take it, but as soon as a period of abstinence happens, you go back to baseline with no withdrawal, which is weird, but when you talk about, can acid be addictive? Well, I don't know. What do you think? Somebody using acid 120 straight days in school, is that an addiction? I'd say yeah. He said yeah. But, he was also a garbage head, which meant he took lots of stuff in combination. And been in recovery 30 years now, so whatever. But so that's the only drug that we know of that, you could develop a tolerance, but you wouldn't necessarily have a withdrawal. Cocaine, right, is not physically addictive unless you think the brain is part of the body. Well, right, Mark, why wouldn't you think? Okay, because cocaine withdrawal It's not the body going into shakes, it's the brain producing thoughts. I want it, 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 I want. Okay, that's cravings, that's urges. That's thoughts. That's not physical withdrawal. Is it real? Definitely is real to them. Okay, so hence why cravings are under withdrawal. That's why it's in the DSM definition, because it's acknowledging, all right, not all drugs produce tolerance and withdrawal in the sense that, you know, you go into cold turkey and you have shakes and 3 days of detox like heroin. Acid doesn't do that. Coke doesn't do that. But withdrawal is part of withdrawal is cravings. Yeah.
What about pause?
Hmm?
What about pause? Would that be post-acute withdrawal syndrome?
Yeah. Right. 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 How bad is it? And what kind of symptoms and all that kind of stuff. Can you get pause from pot?
I think so.
Post-acute withdrawal syndrome,
And
which is a constellation of symptoms.
isn't it true that the longer the use of a substance, the longer pause could
Potentially, yes. So pause, I mean, you can look it up. I guess I should have, but because I remember, yeah, there are treatment people in here that will throw up terms like that, right? Because it's a constellation of symptoms, which post, meaning they've stopped using, acute, meaning they're really feeling it, withdrawal symptoms. Now, we can basically say, well, how long would pause last for, and what drugs would you see it in? So, for example, and I asked rhetorically, but not really rhetorically, could you see that with pot? Now, somebody said yes. I agree. I've said that for about 30 years since my days at Whitebird. In the 80s. Grower comes in from Blue River. It's 30 years later, so I'm sure there's more than one grower in Blue River now. Right? All right? He comes in, he's producing, not that we counted back then, but probably about 25% THC. Fairly good bud for what it was, right? This dude is chain smoking. So he's smoking an ounce a day. He's a grower. You know, producing 80 pounds per batch, right? So even if he just did the bud shake, but he wasn't, he was doing the bud. Rolling joints. Okay, that's physically possible. Smoking an ounce, that's basically 40 joints. That's 2 packs of cigs. I mean, come on, physically it is possible. Really. So, he said, and I quote, well, it's only pot, because his PO, of course, you know, he was from adult parole and probation. His PO says, you know, you gotta quit, go to Whitebird, we're gonna pee you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we do that. Took him a while to pee clean, but he said the reason that he'd had trouble quitting is because in 3 to 5 days, he started having shakes, insomnia, and nausea and vomiting. And he's going, wait a minute, I know people on heroin that are, you know, junkies who are going into full-blown withdrawal, but this is only pot. I mean, this is his words. So at the time, we looked, you know, the only place you could get an internet connection, because this is like 85, right? Go to the U of O, type in the APA databases and the global databases, you know, search term, just like you have with Google now, okay, early internet, both spellings of marijuana, with a J and with an H for the British folks, withdrawal syndrome. Printout comes back, all the overseas databases, okay, where you have high THC pot, India, Jamaica, et cetera, had a withdrawal syndrome. where the severe end of the symptoms all describe what he was doing. Okay? Shakes, nausea, vomiting, insomnia.
So is he using is he using a chemical? I mean, is it part of the?
Oh, no, it's high, basically, at that time, I mean, because this is 85, right? So, right, most people I know of didn't have symptoms that dramatic. But over the years, when I started seeing more pot clients, I did see that range of symptoms with people who smoked as little as an eighth, so definitely an eighth, to a quarter a day. Now this dude smoked an ounce. So somewhere between an eighth and a quarter, because again, this is by a report from clients. This ain't a scientific study, and this is just people coming to see me. But is marijuana addictive? I'm just saying, if the cigarette companies want to get behind it in 68, they are about the money, and they're not going to deal with the substance unless it either starts out being addictive or they can make it more addictive. And what have we been doing? This ain't the natural plant. We've been genetically engineering it to be stronger and stronger. So what do you think is going to happen? And in 1985, that's still 15 years into the domestic marijuana industry, where we're just cultivating plants and starting to do cloning and all that other kind of stuff from different super strains. So I'm just saying, look, this is a drug, just like with 21st century technology, where we're improving on what the natural strains are, if you can even make the case that there are natural strains. Which is not saying that there isn't a medical application for that either, but we're not studying that as well as we should, except for certain narrow applications. So that's basically my thing, is like, let's study it, study the crap out of it, so we know what we're getting into, open eyes. Because, what's going to happen, is that the money is going to dictate it before our morality gets in there. And people are going to get desperate. Look at what happened in Colorado, first day of recreational.
What happened?
100 million in sales in one day. Okay? The state got 33 mil. So what you think they're going to do if they're cash strapped? Okay? And they run out. Okay? So wait, where did all the legally grown pot, if you run out of recreational weed and the medically grown weed, so where's the other pot coming and well, don't ask that question. I'm just saying. Don't ask, don't tell. Look, powerful psychoactive substance with some medical benefit, 10,000 years of history of it being used as a medicine, but you could make the same case with opiates and all that other kind of stuff. All right? We need to study it to see what it does. And you can't study an illegal drug. But if you legalize it or decriminalize it, with an already substantial underground economy, that's dangerous. Because the drug sellers have taken over the drug technology. Which, I'm a maroon. So as a native person, I'm going, not a smart idea. Let the medicine people lead the way in terms of how to do this. Or let's teach people how to replicate the skill without the drug. Personal bias, right? Okay, brain reward. Back to slide, if you would. So 4 types of tolerance. You need more to get the same effect. So this is from DSM-4, dependence, required to feel or function as if normal. That's the same as tissue tolerance. And withdrawal. In the absence of addictive experience, the opposite of effect. So withdrawal is often actually the body's attempt to return to normal, or withdrawal in the case of the brain and brain reward, one symptom of withdrawal is boredom. One symptom of the brain becoming healthy again after drug exposure is boredom. Because from the brain's point of view, any drug use is like Wile E. Coyote and the safe being dropped on his head or the piano. The brain is waiting for a safe to drop out of the sky. I know it's coming. So, addiction is goal-oriented. This definition covers sugar, salt as food additives which affect mood. So basically, if you understand, fast food is basically a drug. French fries are a drug. Ooh. Fried anything. You basically killed any nutritional value except for sugar, salt, and maybe protein. And sugar and salt in those quantities have a drug effect. High fructose corn cereal. GMO corn chips. Oh, don't get me started. Okay? So often sugar and salt are hidden behind the chemical name sodium is always salt. Dextrose is a sugar. High fructose corn syrup. Okay, anything OSE is a sugar. Glucose, maltose. Maltodextrin. Sugar. Right? Caffeine, coffee, theophylline tea, theobromine in chocolate. Caffeine in coffee, theobromine in tea, theobromine in chocolate. These are the xanthines, vegetable-based stimulants. Matine, which is in yerba mate. Vegetable-based stimulants. Tobacco, alcohol, pharmaceuticals. So, gambling, internet day trading, shopping, overspending, chronic debting, video games, underground economy drugs, of course. So, nothing must become addicting, but if you have to lie about it, it's probably an addictive process for you. And can you give it up for 6 months to a year, or 3 for starters? Okay, so DSM acknowledges this. So as pros or wannabe pros, understand when you're talking with your friends or clients, anything less than a year of complete abstinence is not complete recovery. And it's dicey. Okay, you can relapse at any time. You can relapse at any time, but definitely under a year. So a year can be the first goal, but before you can get to a year, you have to get to a week. And with marijuana, you basically need a month. And I usually use the rule of 6 months. Because it takes the first month to detox, another 2 months to get used to driving your brain and body without the substance, and then another 6 months to get used to doing that. By that time, it's half a year, and then you can go for a year. With meth, like I said, a minimum of 3 years. So it could vary by drug. But DSM is basically saying early remission is anything under a year. Okay, so those numbers aren't necessarily coming out of the air. That's basically from practical experience, backed by wherever we've done brain scans on particular substances. So, the new biology, epigenetics. All right. How does this work? How does this stuff work? So, the new biology. Some of you remember this from last term, but maybe you haven't heard of epigenetics. I think it's one of the real cool things about science. So, the old biology, based on a Darwinian, survival of the fittest, Newtonian model, held that human beings, like all animals, are biologically programmed by DNA and evolution to compete. We're machines. We're survival machines. Survival from Darwin, machines from Newton. Sir Isaac Newton, Apple, gravity, calculus, all that stuff. So, in the Newtonian view, this programming essentially makes us robots destined to struggle against or play out billions of years of evolution. Now remember, this whole idea, Newton didn't know about DNA. DNA is a 21st century discovery. But science was influenced by what happened 300-400 years ago. Okay, so Newton, mechanistic cause and effect. Action, reaction. X amount of drug in X amount of blood produces this effect. And then you have a decay rate, right? Dose to weight relationships. Pretty standard, right? You can see the influence on medicine. Now, right? So, cause and effect, survival of the fittest. So, addiction in that framework becomes a goal-oriented response to the addiction of a drug and the mechanics of tolerance, withdrawal, and so on. Oh, all we have to do is just keep you not using. Simple, right? So modern medicine basically worked from a Newtonian model, right? Given disease condition A, take drug B to produce healthy condition C, experience side effects D, E, F. Oh, and if you don't like the side effects, they'll switch you to a new drug or give you a drug to cover the side effects. Does this seem familiar to you? Okay. We're correcting a chemical imbalance. Now, never mind, we never established what a healthy balance is. But we can tell you we're correcting a chemical imbalance and not tell you that we never established a real balance first. And it sounds all scientific, and you never question because it's television, and obviously people believe that they can't put it on television unless it's true, right? So, out of that comes the whole idea of neuroplasticity. So what neuroplasticity is, was we used to think the brain couldn't repair itself or learn, and once you got set at 5 years old, then that's it. 5 years old, and that's what you are. Nothing happens to change that. Well, we've been finding that there are changes across the lifespan. So, my opinion, so to speak, your DNA code evolved in a balance with its environment, which not only involved competition, but also symbiosis with other organisms, sometimes even incorporating the DNA of those organisms as part of itself. Physically speaking, this is where your mitochondrion came from. So we can't live without mitochondria, and their DNA is separate. So the balance already existed. DNA evolved within it and maintained it and was maintained by it. And that's part of what we've inherited. This civilized overlay, especially in 21st century America, is only 200 years old. Pharmaceutical industry is less than 200 years old. Western medicine, really, less than 200 years old. All right? So, the new biology starts from a quantum physics premise. So, for example, Einstein's famous equation, energy and matter are the same thing moving at different speeds. Okay? You're not a physical machine, but a series of energy relationships between you and your environment. That is remembered. Information is stored. So it's more like using computer paradigm, which again, late 20th century to 21st century. How many of you are cell phone users? Is there no one who is not a cell phone user here? Right. Okay? Cell phones are quantum devices. They're based on the science that says that every atom is related to every other atom in the universe. There's a connection. Okay? But in order to get to that, we had to go through a wired telephone to get to a wireless telephone, but the principles are still the same. So your DNA code contains the system memory of every organism back to the first bacteria and the chemicals that run it. Right? So for example, the placebo effect. That is, we tell you that you're taking this drug, we actually give you a sugar pill, and you have the effect of the drug, even though there's no drug physically present. Okay? We tell you you're going to die of terminal cancer in 6 months, and then you die in 3 months, and then we dissect you and there's no cancer, or the cancer isn't enough to kill you. So what killed you? Real event. This happened.
So that's called the placebo effect?
Placebo effect. Okay? Yeah. Right? So there's an energy relationship. So, with this new biology, we're a community of cells starting from 2 one-celled organisms. The individual cell responds to physical, chemical, and energy signals from the environment to either contract to protect itself from toxins or expand and grow in the presence of nutrients. Okay, and the level that it decides that on is an energetic level. So not just physical, but energy signals from the environment. So it's not just a physical drug anymore. It isn't. The placebo effect shows us that. We'll take up this more on Thursday. Huh?
Good thing I drove up here today.
Lane Online. Learn, unlearn, relearn.